In the spring of 1989, the people of America and the Western democracies were mesmerized by the Chinese student democracy movement and the incredible courage and heroism of the Chinese people. Almost every government has a history of murdering its own citizens, its own people, including America. The dictators of China are not alone. Yet, despite the brutal crackdown by China's government, which crushed the democracy movement with tanks and guns, the communists adopted most of the economic policies of the leaders they deposed, and much of modern China's prosperity and growing economic power are a direct consequence of the events that took place in the summer of 1989. In June of 1989, the Chinese Communist government declared war on its own civilians. Using tanks, machine guns, and APCs, the Chinese authorities murdered and maimed tens of thousands of unarmed men, women, and children in the heart of Beijing, the capital of China. Most of the victims had committed no crime. Many were innocent bystanders, murdered in their kitchens, in their beds, or while watching TV. Others were mothers and fathers frantically searching for their children, or old men and women as they rode home in buses or looked out windows into the streets. Yet others were students who dared to challenge the small cadre of ruthless dictators, less than a dozen corrupt old men, who used their power to enrich themselves, their families, and their friends. The students had dared to call for freedom, for justice and liberty, the end of corruption, and for a democratic government that listened and served the people. "We want democracy," they chanted. "Corruption and dictatorship must end." Millions of people from Beijing and across China supported the students and echoed these demands. And it is for this reason that the dictators of Communist China, less than a dozen corrupt old men, declared war against the people, terrorizing millions and maiming and killing tens of thousands of unarmed women and men. The story you're about to hear cannot be heard in China. The gangsters and dictators who govern China will not allow the Chinese people to see the images and pictures you will see. Even this film of a single man, a student, who dared to confront the military might of China's military machine, strikes terror in the hearts of the dictators of China, who fear the Chinese people might be inspired and may stand up and fight for their freedom, for liberty, and for justice once again. The turmoil ended and began with death, sparked by the demise of Hu Yaobang, the former General Secretary of the Communist Party and a hero to millions of Chinese. Hu Yaobang had championed freedom and liberty and had freed 1 million Chinese who had been unjustly imprisoned since the time of Mao's Cultural Revolution. The people called him the soul of China. But when he fought for freedom, and when he dared to fight corruption within the ranks of the Communist Party, the top leaders fought back and removed him from power. Hu Yaobang had been removed 2 years before his death because of his liberalism and the tolerant attitude he had towards similar student demonstrations which had broken out in the 1980s. Deng Xiaoping, senior leader and chairman of the military commission, and the most powerful man in China, disagreed, for he believed he had the most to lose. Deng demanded the demonstrations be stopped and stripped his protege of his power. Hu Yaobang was demoted and replaced by Zhao Ziyang, another champion of freedom and reform. Within 2 years, Zhao Ziyang would be placed under arrest by the right wing of the Communist Party. Hu was a symbol, and his death was a spark that inflamed a nation. Nearly 5,000 university students marched to Tiananmen Square, carrying his picture and to place a wreath on the monument to the revolutionary martyrs, making spontaneous speeches and shouting slogans demanding freedom and democracy. The students chanted, "The wrong man died. He who died should be alive. Those who live should be dead." By crying out, "The wrong man died," was a safe way of criticizing Deng Xiaoping and Li Peng, the premier of China. They gathered at the base of the monument to the revolutionary martyrs, singing an old French revolutionary song, Internationale. The students demanded freedom of speech, freedom of the press, democracy, and the end to crime, profiteering, and corruption among the top leaders who were enriching themselves and their families. The complaints and grievances of the students were many. Our leaders do not listen to the people, they complained. The Chinese media lies to the people. People are afraid to speak out for fear they will be arrested. There was no freedom of speech. The rights of the people were crushed by a government that refused to listen, and hard work and ability were seldom rewarded, as job opportunities and promotions had little to do with ability, but bribes in the favor of political leaders. Indeed, it was well known that the children of the top leaders were offered lucrative business contracts or top leadership posts, and that many leaders lived in mansions and a life of splendor, including Supreme Leader Deng. Carrying pictures of Hu, the students marched to the Monument of Martyrs in Tiananmen Square to stand alongside the carved images of other students who had changed China's history. They also dared to hold their banners and to assemble before the famous portrait of Mao on the Tiananmen Gate, symbolically rejecting Mao and replacing his memory with Hu. Again and again they scaled the monument to the revolutionary martyrs. The students shouted, "Down with dictatorship! Long live democracy!" waving banners, singing, chanting, and making speeches. Many demanded freedom of speech, freedom of the press, democratic elections, and the end to financial crimes and corruption by China's top leaders and their families. The complaints were many. Culture and education had suffered